Welcome to my podcast, Shaping Your Journey. My name is Aldo Mazza, percussionist, drummer, and artistic director of Kosa Music, inviting you to listen in on conversations with friends, artists, professionals, and experts in our music world. Today, I have the great opportunity and honor. Finally, I get you on. I get you on. You're so busy. This is like chasing a wildcat, but finally we did it. The great Gary Quadros, who is an agent, a music promoter in Montreal and beyond. Welcome, and thank you so much, Gary, for taking the time to do this with me.
Hey, my pleasure, Aldo. I'll make one correction to the introduction, though. I have done some promoting, but I'm not a promoter. I'm more a producer and a buyer, and present large-scale events, whether they be on television or live, for the past 30 years. But I have to give credit where credit is due to those promoters that go out there and take a financial risk night after night.
Yeah, and you're a major force behind it. But before we talk about that a little bit, I want you to just bring us into the very beginning. What made you fall into this? Fall into it. I mean, what was that spark that made you want to do this, or it was I won't say passion, but something of such interest that you just got pulled into it? Where did it start?
I'd say it's a mix between passion or love for the music business and a fluke. You don't really know where you're going to go or where your journey's taking you. I started quite young, and it was a chance meeting. I was a doorman. I was going to McGill University, and I was a doorman at the old Peel pub that people may remember from years back.
Oh, wow.
And one late night, this band of musicians from Atlanta walked in the door, and we became friends. And I saw them for a couple of weeks, and I was a little bit impatient with school. And then one night I became friends with the musicians, and they said, "Hey, we're heading out on the road. If you'd like, we're doing a couple of weeks. Would you like to come along? We need help." So I went for the adventure. And that was really the start. We did a short tour of Quebec all the way up to Sept-Îles, and then they were going to Atlanta, and I had a week to go home and tell my folks that I was going to leave McGill and go with a rock band, an unknown rock band, to go play clubs in Atlanta.
I'm sure that went over really well too.
That was one of the surprising things, though. Growing up in a family, very tight-knit family, and quite a strict family, I got all the support. They were like, "This is the journey that he has to do. So take the time and go do it." And I did it, and it lasted 6 months. I missed my mom's home cooking. I didn't enjoy eating Chef Boyardee out of a can after loading out in a truck. So I came home. But again, a chance. That band signed a management deal with a Montreal manager who would go on later on and change my journey and my life. And that man was Luc Feneuf.
Oh, wow. Yes.
Luc,
yes,
who
yes.
is, legendary in the Quebec music business, managing careers from André Gagnon to Offenbach, and to this Plume La Traverse, for the only manager, and now today Plume is still managed by Feneuf, but Benjamin, the son. But back then, Luc had signed this band, but he had another need for me. He had Véronique Béliveau, who had a deal with A&M Records back then for an English record with Richard Carpenter. Also the CTV television specials that Véronique was involved in. So it was more, he needed a bilingual person. So I said, "Hey, Luc," I met with him, and I said, in another iconic little music venue in old Montreal, the Bijou.
Oh my God.
So yeah, we met in the Bijou for drinks.
Gary, you're killing me. Yes, I remember when I first moved to Montreal, these were like the places. Yeah.
Yeah, this is late 80s, and so I said to Luke, "Hey, I'll give you 6 months, because then I promised my parents I'm going to go back to school." We never really talked about the 6 months ever again, and it went on to be over 20 years, and I became partners with Luke. Luke was very, very generous with me and in advancing, helping me advance in my career. And it all started. I started answering the phone, and we had enough knowledge for supply and demand to become an agent and get to know the people on the phone. And back then, it wasn't email, or it was you were on the phone talking, taking notes, typing
Yes.
out contracts with carbon copies, and if you made a mistake on the last line, you started over again.
Yes. Yeah. That's
But it
amazing.
was
And
relationships.
yeah.
It's a good part, and that was a good foundation to the business.
Yeah, no, it's great because I mean, you brought me back to Luc Phaneuf, because I worked with Andre Gagnon, and I mean, I remember they talked about management because as a musician, you're always looking out for people who are not as kosher or as Catholic, whichever way you want to say it, in the business. But he was always I mean, people spoke well of him all the time,
Yeah.
and certainly he did some great work with Andre Gagnon. He was a great pianist, great. I mean, he had a great career, and the music. I mean, the first time I played with him was on the fly because I was still at McGill, and my teacher came in and said the percussionist for Andre Gagnon can't make this tour in the States. Here's the number, call the Phaneuf office, or what I forget what was said, but he said you're going to meet them in at the Kennedy Center in Washington. No
Wow.
rehearsal. The rehearsal was the sound check. But I mean, all those names you mentioned here, Veronique Béliveau. Wow, I had forgotten about her. She was huge. She was great. Yeah,
Still today, when I cross her path, still very, very lovely lady, a good friend.
nice. And I remember when I first met you, it was one of those big productions you were involved with, and it just came to me this morning as I was thinking about.
That was back in the great time when we were allowed tobacco sponsorships before C1.
Yes, yes,
The
that was
Demorier days.
yeah, the more. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Demorier concert stage.
And yeah, we filmed the thing in Quebec City at the Capitol with the Repercussion, my group,
Repercussion.
with Les Ballets Jazz de Montréal. That's right. Oh, that was amazing. I still have the clips from that. That was beautiful. Gary, you
And
were
that's
amazing.
still, that was one of the things that set me on a different path. From the agent, that was a transition from agent to producer. Agent management into producing, creating. Demore were a big supporter of the arts.
Yeah,
But they were all about, they came to us and said, guys, create us unique moments where you take different arts, different genres of music,
hmm,
whether it be repercussion and mix them with dance, whether it be a rock band like the Tea Party and add a symphony orchestra to it. We went on to do that, what we did together, 16 hours of variety television and
wow.
produce shows from coast to coast. But it opened, I built more relationships across the country, and it was meeting people that had vision. Don Shipley, who was the artistic director back then for Harborfront, who brought in everything from dance companies from around the world to theater to Derek Edwards doing music,
Right.
who's still a force in Toronto in the music scene. But a lot of different creative minds, from artistic directors, musical directors, and put me on a different path. But these were magical days with the relationships and long conversations and meetings. It wasn't as fast paced as just send me an email like today is. And I
Right.
tend to now lean towards making the phone call.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you finding that? I'm curious because we're both at that point where we grew up with that. I mean, calling people was what you did, and having relationships, and you built. You said the Maurier. We did a concert where they reached out to us. They did something in New York where somebody won a prize. Oh no, a bunch of people won a trip to New York. And one of the things they did was we performed at the rooftop of the Hudson Hotel one evening with us, and then they took them out VIP, and they did this whole thing. I mean, how in those days there was this imagination that you're speaking of, and stretching out, getting out of the box. A percussion group from Montreal playing on the rooftop of the Hudson Hotel, plus they had other entertainment or culture, but it wasn't just entertainment. It was really cultural based. And then we would call people. Now we don't call people. You have to ask permission to call, which is kind of weird
Well,
for us, right?
I remember one of the best pieces of advice, and I'm going to do a name drop here, a legend. Luke had me call Donald K. Donald, and I had been brought
Wow.
into Luke, and I was working with francophone artists, and Veronique was the English artist, but I was like, okay, I don't know any of these people. I've got to, it wasn't part of my background growing up, in an English household and English schooling. And now I'm discovering the Quebec music industry, but whoa, we have this, all of a sudden we need Donald. So Luke just says, call Donald. And I went, Donald K. Donald, the guy on my tickets. So I called up and I left a message for Donald. And sure enough, 5 minutes later, the phone rings in my office and it's Donald.
Wow.
And I right away, thank you, Mr. Tarleton, for calling me back. And it was the first piece of advice Donald ever gave to me, in that he said, Gary, he goes, no matter who it is, he goes, you return all your phone calls. Return all your, and I still to this day tell young agents that I meet, I take the time to call agents just to talk to them and say, what's new this year? Tell me what's your passion? What's going to make me look good on my productions?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that came from Donald. Return your phone calls, make those phone calls. Luke was all about relationships and taking the time to speak to people.
Yeah. That's an amazing thing, and I have to thank you also, because you were helpful. I was thinking about a couple of other things, not just when we first met, but since then. I said, so where did we cross paths? And you've always, like when you say return the calls, I'm the same. I just don't understand why people wouldn't, and you send a wrong message, or you need this thing to be, we're interactive and we help each other. And I remember, I mean, I was very, very close to Neil Peart, and when he had left, I kind of lost touch with him, and we were supposed to do an album together. We had talked about doing Repercussion and Neil Peart, a whole production, and we had started this whole thing. Then he, unfortunately, the sadness, he lost his wife and his daughter, and he just left. And then I just left it at that, and then lost complete contact. But when I knew he was back and back on, I had I said, how do I reach back to Neil and just to say hi and stuff? And that's when I reached out to you. I said, maybe Gary can help. And you did. So you reconnected me
In
with
contact with SRO.
Yeah, in Toronto. And then we're back on with Neil. And of course, I never mentioned that whole thing because I didn't want to bring all those projects might have been related to his past. So I just said, Neil, all the things we had talked about doing, what about you coming out to COSA and just talking, just being there. You don't have to play. We just talk. And he says, no, I love the idea. So we got it together at one point. Every time I would reach out, he says, no, sorry, I'm on a tour, but let's keep trying. Let's see when and what. Always wrong time because it was summer. And then at one point he writes me back and he says, Aldo, your timing is perfect. I'm in my house in Morin Heights here near Montreal. My family at the time, he had a new family in Los Angeles. And he says, they're not coming up for a couple of weeks, so I have some time, and this will be perfect. I'll just drive down. So, okay. So I set it up, and I said, and I know we all knew how how private he was. I said, I won't mention, you'll be a total surprise. No one will know. You'll walk into the room, there'll be 60, 70 people in the room, and, we'll have a surprise talk, and that's it. And then he was working on a video, his last video that he did with Hudson Music. And then he said, okay, well, maybe we can get the Hudson guys involved. And then I thought, okay, now I have to tell my techs that this is going to happen. But I said, okay, I don't have to tell them who it is yet, because if the word gets out, then I will break my promise. So I couldn't do that. It just so happened that summer, there was a crew from, we were in Vermont, a crew from one of the TV stations that was doing a documentary on us. So I said to the Hudson guys, I said, listen, we have a crew here that's top line, and I know them. They've been here before doing a documentary. Why don't you use them when we're doing this filming? Because Hudson was on board now to add this to his video. And I said, this way, nobody will know. They won't see the difference. It's the same crew that's been here all week filming. I said, excellent. So then Neil writes me back and he says, oh, well, let's not just talk, let's play. So, and this was like 4 days before. And I said, oh, no, that's incredible. I didn't want to push it. So I said, sure. But now I have to tell the techs to set up this particular drum set, which was what he endorsed. And,
which was quite recognizable.
Yes. And then I had to keep it quiet until the morning of. And people would say, so who is the special guest that everybody's talking about? I said, it'll be a surprise, to the last minute. And that almost killed me. But I mean, he came out, we played. I had some of the other guys in, I orchestrated something. I said, I can't tell you who's going to be here, but let's put this African thing together and this together in case we go there. So everybody's standing by, and on cue, these things would happen, but it was all improvised, totally 100%. And Neil, like, then he writes me the next day. He says, man, I drove back to Montreal with a smile on my face the whole time. He says, let's do this again.
Great moments, man.
No. And that was great, because all those people in the room, some came up to me, of course, and, were hugging me and crying tears. And I said, it's about, and Neil knows that, it's about giving back and it's about sharing. It's not about him. It's about making the world a better place with every breath, with everything you do. Yeah. And that's what it's about. And I mean, we never finished the project, because then I said, well, how about you come to Cuba? You've never been to Cuba. He says, great idea, but that never worked out, unfortunately. But I mean, you were responsible for my reconnect with that, and I have to thank you, Gary. You're
my pleasure. Well, anybody asks, like when you can help, and that's part about the calls and returning calls, and you shouldn't have a price tag on a phone call or where it'll bring you.
Yeah, that was very
especially in this business.
Yeah. And I think, beyond that, I think we should all be part of somebody else's success, no matter what. And that's what makes it. I mean, we're not people who live under rocks. Humans need other people, and we need these networks that we can help each other. And then there's a moment where somebody does something that's very helpful to you, and that's the person who can open that door or make that introduction, and just allow for the positive to happen and the great things to happen, because if you let them happen, they will, right?
Yeah, and it starts from the bottom up, from and no matter how big a production is, I found that I love to connect. I love to go in and hang out with the crew.
Okay.
I like to see them unload. Not that I'm going to push a case, but I'm always interested. I want to know how they're doing. I want to know that they're well. We consult with them on different aspects of productions. and when you get up, especially when you get to the crazy world of television, you know,
Right.
every single department is essential to be communicating together. And it's the sum of all of those departments: sound, lighting, set design, choreography, stage management, that take on massive roles in the success.
Yeah.
And it's, those people, they all recognize when you speak to you have those bonds. They'll go to war, and you know how it's not always easy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, connecting and making sure things happen. I just had another thought that I had forgotten about actually not so long ago. I was asked to do a Canada Day concert for the ambassador in Havana, our
Yeah.
ambassador there. And I had this idea, which wasn't really working out. And then so I reached out to you, and I said, Gary, what would be something else? And so you gave me the jerry cans, and so now that was that amazing how things can come up, and I had no idea how creative, what great things going on in Canada's north. And as much as I know, all of a sudden I felt Gary just opened up, turned on the lights.
And I just reached to this morning. I connected back with them today,
Okay.
and not a jerry cans issue, but just Andrew, who's a member, who's Akula Music, who
Right.
runs the label up in Nunavut, who's he knows the scene there.
Oh yeah, and it was amazing how we connected. Once I connected with him, and like we became friends instantly. And then we're talking about what we're going to do, and it's funny, Gary. I don't know if I had told you this, but 2 days after this whole thing shifted to Nunavut, which I had discovered, and he was showing me things. I said I had no idea how open this is, how incredible this world is. And then I went to my doctor for a follow up, and his office had moved, and so I hit a wrong floor because it's the second time I was there. I said I wasn't sure if it's third floor or fourth, so I pushed the button. The doors open, and there's this big sign that says the Nunavut Cultural Center, and I said, "Well, that's interesting."
Yeah.
so so I said, "Okay, I know where I'm going after my appointment." And then I did, and then here, right in the same building. I don't believe in coincidences. So afterwards I came back and I went to their office, and there was nobody there. It was as if they were waiting to show me around, to show me and tell me more about this. And I said, "That's incredible that all this is just coming at me in this short amount of time, Nunavut, and all this great stuff and what they're doing." So I have to thank you for that too, Gary.
My pleasure. We've been fortunate. We've worked with some wonderful artists from Nunavut.
What are the some of the moments that were decisive for you, apart from meeting Donald Tarleton, who was he was the mega force here. Uh, there are other people who just help us shape our journey and become who we become, and they have a lot to do with it. What were some other moments that were key in your world?
One, and I don't want to make fun or make a joke about it, but one was Luke's failing health. Luke unfortunately had a few hard episodes, and on one I was on tour, with a show. I was in the Middle East, and Luke had a TV show he was producing that I was not involved in. And his wife called me up, and I think I was in Cyprus, and she says, "You have to fly home because Luke's had a heart attack. He's in the hospital. And in a week, we've got to produce this television show, and we need you back here." So I flew overnight and flew home and arrived, and all of a sudden I was leading a production for a television show. And that was a shift, and that That was even pre the Du Maurier days, which was a much full blown out television production. But that's, that also led to, oh, okay, there's more to this business. And in the last third of my career, I've been in it over 30 years. I no longer represent artists. I create shows. I work with clients. I work, Canada Day on Parliament Hill and all the Canada Day shows, the national broadcast, and working with our broadcasters is creating unique and bringing artists from all over the country together, to celebrate the country. And I do the same thing in Quebec, whether it is for Saint Jean Baptiste shows and for the Fête Nationale. So it's creating moments. So whether it be for television or just for live, my focus now is all on discovering new. I'm fortunate for 20 years to work up at Mont Tremblant with the Blues Festival, with the Rhythms Festival, and you're talking to me about the rhythms. So how many rhythms from all over the world we can go get sounds. So it's an amazing playground to be able to wake up and you don't know where you're going every day, but you get to discover. Right, so I spend a lot of time researching, reading, listening. People say they come to my house and visit, and they'll say, Gary, you never have music on, or it's always quiet when I come to dinner at your house. And I go, well, I've been listening to music and spent 10 hours today listening to music, and now I'm here, I want to listen to you.
Right. No, that's true. And in all those years that you've been doing this, what is the major shifts that you're seeing, post COVID, and the transitions we've all been making, and getting through all of that? I mean, we're mammals of social mammals, so that was very difficult for most people, especially touring musicians and performers and all of that. And certainly, I got hit by that. We all did, but I mean, the new mindset. Where are you seeing it from where you're standing or
It's
sitting?
scary at times in that we come from a school way back when, and that still today I still say nothing will ever replace the live experience, feeling live musicians.
Right.
We went through synth bands, way back when, but nothing ever would replace the feeling if you stood in the middle of a symphony orchestra, or you hear a band, gelling together in a live sweaty bar or a venue, like Metropolis or MTELUS today. We had to see bands, and through technology and all the way to today, where today now, so a lot of people will expect programming based on social media popularity. Back in the day, we used to advertise. It was word of mouth. You had to get the word out about this band. Word would spread across the country. If a tour started in Vancouver or it started in St. John, by the time it hit Toronto or Winnipeg, people were on the phone telling each other, you cannot miss this band. You've got to see this band. You've got to see this act. Today, it's all up there. Everybody's seen it. And you go to a show and everybody's got their phones out.
Yes.
They're more cameramen, and they're posting it on their socials. And I get caught up in it too now and then, and I'll put up a video of concerts and shows, and you're sharing that experience. But I find that the social media aspect is one asset. There's tools. I see them as tools for reach, for exposing what we're doing, for ways of media coverage. But I find that a lot of times people lose contact, and they lose the connection to the band, through the digital music revolution from, now vinyl's coming back, and that's a wonderful thing. And why is it a wonderful thing? Because yeah, when MP3s came out, bands would work their ass off to put a record together, and you pick and choose. You buy one song. You
Right.
don't even listen. You don't hear a vision. You don't get that vision. You don't get an album. You don't read the story that the artist is trying to tell you. So today it's bits of information. A lot of the times the artist isn't even writing. They've got social media teams that are pasting this. So you lose the connection. Some of them
Right.
have some artists have managed it well, have been able to connect, but those are the ones that are actually handling it themselves.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, of course. I mean, I remember when we'd go out and buy albums, and I had a collection of 5,000 albums at one point, which became crazy every time I wanted to move. And so I sold my whole collection because it was all intact and it was all cataloged and everything. I only kept maybe 200 albums, and albums that I played on, and or I produced, or that were collectors, and then we all went through that phase where we said, I'll
Yeah.
just put them there. And one day, and now I'm listening to LPs, most of the more than CDs. And it's what a joy, what a feeling. Because I mean, you always have to remember to pick up the needle and turn it around, which, but, listening to the sound of those, wow, it's really something. And of course, I'm glad it's come back, because there's a whole depth that we were missing. You're listening to music through these tiny tiny things, and we spent so much time creating that sound. You're not going to get that in that
No.
little box. Not the
Listening
same.
to the album, taking the time to put a record on a record player. My brother and I have that have that rule. Did you listen to the album? What's the album like? Even to this very day, don't send me one song. We share the album.
Nice. That's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, because I mean, the album says a story, and I mean, being on the other side when I'm working on an album, I'm not just thinking songs. I'm not thinking. We're thinking, what's the idea behind it? Even if it's not my production, if I'm on somebody else's production, we always talk about what are we achieving here. It's not just coming up with some great parts. It's here's the story behind all of this. So everything we do is related to what happens in the end. According to, if it's somebody's project, you have to understand where they're coming from and why they're doing this, and what's the story. Yeah, no, you're making me think of this in a larger sense. Yeah.
Well, it comes down to me, it comes to the connection. The connection, they invested, you connect with that artist. Artistically, for me, as a producer for other events other than that musical product, is seeing the depth. Where do they go? Oh, that simple track, that instrumental. Oh, that spoken word piece. This artist has different zones where he wants to, or she wants to take us. So you really have a connection, you understand, and that type of information and that type of connection doesn't go away. You'll always have it. Whereas one song, I can't remember what was playing on my radio on the last time I was in the car.
Right, right. It's interesting. Thanks for bringing that up. Now it's kind of things you knew, but never really thought about it in that light. Yeah, fantastic. Um, do you see artists? Here's something that was really interesting. I had a discussion the other day, because we're always talking about the Beatles, and every time I was a big, huge Beatles fan. And Ringo, I would do a clinic about explaining Ringo and all the parts. everything he played, if you listen to it, it's like genius, genius. And I'd have these discussions with Greg Bisonet, who's his drummer, who's a close friend, and he's been at Cosa many times. So we always have these discussions and about how did he come up with that, and I was trying to see where it started and where it landed. Yes, but what happened in this transition? And it's this whole relationship to the music that was created. It was genius, and somebody the other day saying, "Yeah, but those are the geniuses." Today, I don't hear it so much. You have to really dig. And I said, "Well, maybe because we had fewer channels back in the day. Today there are a million channels, not three." So, and music is coming from 360 all over the planet, the digital universe. So there are many different places to look at. How many places can you look at one time anyway? So, in all fairness, I'm not sure about if that was right. What would you say about that?
You lose focus for sure. It's today it's really hard to focus. Back before all of this, the web and the social media and everything that bombards us, every day, we had time to focus.
Mm,
Today, a lot of people can't go with 5 minutes without looking at their phone, and that's just going to distract you. Um, it's a great gift if you're able to just forget about your phone. You
right.
use it when you need to use it, and you take time in life to do other things. I preach this a lot, but I'm not an expert at it, but it's important in what you do, to take the time and to stay focused on don't like using saying the job at hand, but where you want to go, whether it's creative. That's another thing. A lot of these young artists, and I this was a funny twist from FNF just before I got out of FNF, um, 13 years ago when I left, on wonderful terms because I was away from Benjamin had taken the office and built it into a management and agency, and I wanted to go off and do projects and stay in the music industry and go off on. I've lost my train of thought though.
In the production, when you left FNF, you're going
Yeah, when I left FNF, but
the focus on
I'm
your own
sorry,
projects.
Aldo. That
No, no.
happens to me now and then.
No, you know what the problem is, Gary? There is so much to say that you're going to try and say it in 30 seconds, but you can't because there's just too much going on, and especially in a time like this, when like you were saying, people are watching their phones, and we're all guilty of that. But if you manage to know what your focus is, and you say, okay, I'm going to go and do this now. Like in your case, you're doing productions because you're a creative person. You have some ideas, so you want to step away and bring to the world those ideas in the way you perceive them.
Yeah,
So
and it allows me to go off and allows us to go off and focus on those things that are important. There could be 100 different things, but not when you're in an agency setting and there's responsibilities towards artists that you have to take very seriously. And when you get to a point where that's not for you or you can't do that, then you know the dreamers have to be able to go off and dream and do what they have to do, and that's in essence what I did.
and you're really good at it. Um, and it's nice to be able to get up in the morning and you have this idea. I don't know if you're the same as me, but and I posed this to a couple of other friends. When I envision a project, I see the whole project already in 3D, and I can practically describe it. And some people say, well, that's not the way I think. I think, okay, it would be great to do this. And then I start piecing it together, and then it looks like this. I said, I don't understand that. I understand what I'm looking for, and that's what I'm going to go after and produce or create. And then I work backwards to make it happen. Are you the same?
I can't say I'm 100%, definitely not 100% complete guy. There's always an initial idea, and that takes time, and sometimes I have a French saying that I use to tell my friends because we never have work hours, and that they could call me at 8 o'clock at night, and I'll say, I'm sorry, I didn't have time for you then, because ça coule. When it's flowing,
Flowing,
that's
yes.
when I get the Aldo Mazza, and it comes to me right away, and it's all got to come out, and you got to draw the picture and draft as much as you can. The rest of the time is picking people's brains, and you know where you want to go with different things, but you're just gathering. You're out there hunting and gathering, and it can be on a bicycle, it can be taking a walk, it can be in your car, it can be in an airplane, but it's picking up pieces, reading, listening, reading artist notes on their website, and background information, feeding yourself. And all of those episodes will happen, will provoke in my work process a moment where it'll all just come gushing out.
Interesting. Yeah. No, no, and I'm glad you said that because I'm the same. I like to keep abreast. I like to be listening. I like to be watching. And whenever I'm working on a project, I would do the same. I call people and I'd say, what do you think of this? Is now you see something from a different perspective, or before you make decisions, I guess what it comes down to, and I know I'm like that. I have this idea that I'm working on and I see it, but before announcing it outside of myself, I check in and I'm saying, am I missing something, or is there something that that's going on, being receptive to that this makes sense at this particular time. That's,
Well,
I mean,
one thing that helps that I found coming through, and being in the pre-internet Google search idea mode, and it was one of the first things Luke sent me. First or second week I was working with him, he goes, Gary, you got to go to Dorval Airport, sit in a room and take this course. And it was a personal organization course. And it was about being organized, structuring, don't go to bed with your mind full, you know. And what that in essence did was start me on my journal journey.
okay.
So I write down everything. Still to this day, even though you have a great memory of deals, fees, I've finally forgotten everybody's phone number. Only very most recently, because you just hit a name on an iPhone. But I remembered everybody, every concert, every show buyer in Quebec. I remembered every single phone number.
Wow.
But it was from writing it down 100 times. And still to this day, I'm a journal taker. I write down everything. I write down post meeting notes. After this, I'll have a little squibble, and then I'll know, and I'll go back on my days, and when I'm looking for ideas, and I'll go back and I'll be reading these notes, and I keep all my journal books, and they're all over. People get bugged. They're all over my office. It beats my old roommates when I was starting in the business, and Post-its were invented, and I was sticking Post-its all over the living room to not forget things. But it came from it's one of the most useful tools that I've kept, always writing in a book.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm totally with you on that. I still do it. I mean, I take notes whenever I go to a project. I have my personal report. I want to remember this, or a thought that comes to me. I mean, we did a project way back with repercussion. It was called Supercussion, And and I said, that was such a great idea. We did it at Roy Thompson Hall. We did it a couple of times in Quebec City. And I said, that's something that, I mean, I'm ready for this. Like I have this calling, so I have to make it happen. And bringing together all these world cultures on one stage, everybody has their voice, and the kind of production that I like to get involved in. And then I saw that, I took that note, and I looked back, and it starts. I coupled that with another one. It helps you remember, of course, and it helps you being organized, so that those things that were important one day become really important when the time comes, right?
And it's so satisfying when you live that moment and you can go back and open your notebook and say, that's when I had that idea. That's when we came up, or that's when that person, shared that bit of information that took us here.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it works for me. I do lists, I do mini reports, I sum it up, or ideas that come, I just jot them down, I just put them down, and it's easier now because I put it all in my phone. I don't I don't do the writing, but I think the writing is a lot more powerful because it stays longer. Yeah.
The podcast, your podcast, did this start during pandemic?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. It's funny, Gary. What happened during pandemic, and this is a funny thing. In that year, 2020 was going to be my biggest year for everything. That I was on the road, all these projects I had going in Cuba and China and Europe. My book, Cuban Rhythms for Percussion and Drum Set, had come out. I had been booked for book tours, clinics, workshops. It was my 25th anniversary with Yolan, and you remember Yolan.
Yeah.
We were actually, when you and I met on that show,
You just started, yeah. It was
we
the
had just
beginning.
been engaged. And she told me this morning, she says, yes, that was, I won't say the number of years ago, but it was a long time ago. And I says, it was like yesterday. And and then, all of these things that just in order. And during COVID, everything stopped. And it was funny because I said to Yolan, I'm looking at my calendar and I don't see 2 days in sequence where we could take a break. So why don't we take a little vacation before all of this starts? And that was in February of that year. And then when we came back, it was complete shutdown. So we spent the next month, 2 months, uh, reimbursing everybody, canceling this, renegotiating that, shutting down. And it was, but at the same time, then I started this because this studio here, where it's the Cosa Academy, we were doing all these workshops and all of these things, and I said, well, I'm going to turn this into my play band. And and then what I did was all these other things came, and I'm sure you had the same. Um, I said we have to old everything that I've done. I've always filmed and archived. I just like that. So everything repercussion has ever done, audio and video, I have it in its various forms. Everything that Kosa has done, we film. So all of these major people in the drum and percussion world were all filmed. And so I decided we're going to digitize everything. So I put everybody back to work. I said, okay, you can do that at home. Here are the tapes, like
Oh, that's
3,000
great.
tapes. So that was done. And then I said, we did some projects online, like the workshop, and I got some of the people to do a workshop, and then, um, all the great guys that I'm used to working with. And then at one point I said, we haven't been to Cuba, and our friends in Cuba who we normally engage, who are the top musicians there, they're also not working. They're at home. So I
Mhm.
said, let's do an online, a 2-day intensive live from Havana. It's, everybody said, you're crazy. I said, well, host it here, but 2 days intensive with Changuito, Piloto, Amadito Valdez. I mean, like everybody, all the guys who are normally with us. We did conferences, we did clinics, workshops, classes, interactive, and we filmed it. So I have it all done. And then all these ideas I had of products, accessories that I had designed and made prototypes for. I said, well, I never had the time nor the patience to go through the patenting process and lawyers, and I just couldn't see how in God's name I would do that. But now suddenly I had all the time, and so I started those processes, and all my inventions are now coming out one at a time. There's launching one next month. It's a music stand for mallet instruments, and Manhasset, which is the biggest music stand manufacturer, is producing it, and we're launching it, and it's a game changer. So,
Nice.
so you say COVID, it was a huge negative, but it also turned everything around and allowed me to like stop running so fast and doing these
It did
things.
open certain doors, you know.
And for you,
Uh,
I'm sure it's the same. Yeah.
Travel, you know. As much as I enjoy seeing people, and after a couple of years of Zoom meetings and Teams meetings and whatever platform they were on, it's terrible. It's hard to work in this way creatively with your artistic collaborators, I find. However, from a business point of view, traveling to go meet clients for a 2 hour meeting that you're in your car for 2.5 hours, or you're flying to Toronto for an hour, and that's 4 hours to get there with airport time. You go, you have your meeting, you come back, you've lost the whole day. This virtual world and the Zooms and this way to do it is a lot easier.
Sure, sure. And then this podcast, when I got the idea for it, I said, we're all sitting at home or in our studios, and let's have the discussion about things that we never really had time to talk about. So that's how that started, and it's shaping your journey. Like I thought it was important, like having that discussion in this point in time for those of us who have such histories, crossing paths with great people on all levels, and then we can inspire others. I mean, it's great to hear our kind of stories, but it's great for those who may not have been part of it to hear everybody's version of those kinds of stories. Where did that come from? Why? What were you thinking? And I think it's super inspiring for people, and have it out there, you know.
No, definitely. And everybody should, I took the time, and I don't do these things ever. I'm not very comfortable at them. You're a friend. And
Thank
I
you.
said,
Thank you.
I'll do this for you, but it's having people take the time, to do things you don't normally do either. And that's for everybody out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
No,
very important.
and also, I mean, it's good for people who were not. I mean, you will continue working and continue producing and inventing these projects, but it's great to see the people who are behind the scenes, who don't always get center stage, who don't always show up in those meetings, the person on the stage, but those people like yourself, make things happen, and every part is super important. And how does it work, and why does it work? And there's some great minds that are behind a lot of what we do, and we wouldn't be without people like yourself, people like who will
The grand
support.
majority of those people behind the scenes have great minds and great creativity and bring, an unbelievable amount. They're owed this. That's why I always love seeing an act that will acknowledge his crew and take the time to acknowledge everybody within their team.
Sure. No, you're absolutely right. Everybody's important. I mean, if the sound man didn't was as good as he was, or really cared about his craft, his or her craft, then the artist on the stage, it could be Paul McCartney, would sound awful.
Yeah.
And who's the winner? I mean, everybody's the winner if we all acknowledge and we all do our best, and we're all super important. Even the doorman, we say the doorman, but everything is important because there's a place and an importance to everything. and to everybody. And if everybody does whatever they do well, like you say, Gary, and it's nice that people acknowledge, because none of us ever arrived or achieve what we do by ourselves. That's not possible. There are a lot of people involved, quiet in the background. A lot of things made things happen for that person to shine at that moment. Another time it's somebody else's moment. Then we become, like I said earlier, that become part of their success, whatever that is. And everybody's important. You're absolutely right. And you don't have to do this because you don't need publicity. But you don't need to be promoted. You just people know that there are people all over the map of doing things or getting things done, that it just they're important. And the fact that you take the time is a bigger, for me. I mean, you take the time to do this. That's a big one, and I appreciate it.
I was gonna. Any time was about to be the first word to come out, but I can't say that. In all truthfulness, any time. However, yeah, no, it goes without saying, Aldo. This. I wasn't going to turn this down for you.
Yeah. Well, I thank you so much, and I want to thank you for taking the time, and B, I value your friendship, and I hope this is inspiring to anybody listening, how how important everybody is in the picture. And having said that, I always say, to be continued. Thank you, Gary.
Thanks, Aldo.